She thought hiding in plain sight would save her. She was wrong. 7 months pregnant and waitressing at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, Mara Vale has been living on borrowed time. Invisible, silent, surviving. Until tonight. Until he walks through the door with his fiancée on his arm and a gun beneath his jacket. Nico Moreau, the crime boss who believes she's dead. The father of the child she's carrying. The man whose world she fled to protect the life growing inside her. Now recognition flickers in his eyes, and the careful lie she's built is about to shatter. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels. Alcom. The rain had started an hour before sunset, turning Manhattan into a kingdom of black glass and neon veins. It drummed against the tall windows of L'Honneur d'Or, the kind of restaurant where a single entree costs more than Mara Vale made in a week, where shadows wore tailored suits and secrets hid behind crystal wine glasses, where people like her, the staff, the invisible, existed only to serve. Mara moved through the dining room with practiced grace, her swollen belly hidden beneath the specially tailored black uniform her manager had grudgingly approved. 7 months pregnant and still working double shifts because rent didn't care about morning sickness or swollen ankles. Because survival had become her only religion. She kept her head down. Always down. Never meet their eyes. Never draw attention. The rules she'd lived by since the night she'd run. Table 12 needs water, Jacques snapped from behind the bar. His thin face pinched with the perpetual irritation of a man who hated his job and everyone in it. And table 7 is asking for you specifically. Mara's heart stuttered. Me? Why? How should I know? Maybe you smiled at them last week. Maybe they like pregnant waitresses. His sneer was ugly. Just go, and don't embarrass us. She filled a crystal pitcher with ice water, her hand steady despite the tremor running through her spine. Table 7. She tried to remember who'd been sitting there, but the past weeks had blurred into an endless cycle of sore feet and forced smiles. The dining room stretched before her like a minefield. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Candlelight flickered across white tablecloths. Beautiful people murmured beautiful lies to each other, their laughter like champagne bubbles, effervescent and empty. Mara navigated between tables, her body moving on autopilot while her mind cataloged exits. The kitchen, the front door, the service corridor that led to the alley, old habits from a life she'd tried to bury. Then she saw him. Nico Moreau sat at the corner table like a king surveying his kingdom, all brutal elegance in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, beautiful and merciless. Eyes like winter storms, a mouth that had once whispered promises against her skin. The pitcher nearly slipped from her hands. He was supposed to be in Paris. The gossip sites had shown him at Fashion Week, photographed beside leggy models and expensive art. Far away. Safe. Impossible. But there he sat, utterly real, terrifyingly close. And beside him, draped across the adjacent chair like a designer accessory, was Celeste Rourke. Blonde, flawless, wearing a diamond engagement ring the size of Mara's knuckle and a smile sharp enough to cut. Mara's lungs forgot how to work. She'd known, theoretically, that Nico had moved on, that his world had continued spinning without her. But seeing it, seeing her, the woman who'd replaced the ghost Mara had become, felt like swallowing glass. "Are you the pregnant one?" The voice came from table 12, jerking Mara back to the present. An older woman in pearls stared at her with the kind of polite curiosity usually reserved for zoo animals. Yes, water? Please, and tell Jacques we're ready for our check." Mara poured with shaking hands, barely registering the woman's continued small talk. Her entire awareness had narrowed to a single point across the room, to the man who'd once held her like she was something precious, who'd promised to build her a life far from violence and fear, the man who thought she was dead. She'd made sure of that. The staged accident, the closed casket funeral that Nico's people had arranged, the newspaper obituary that had misspelled her name, all carefully orchestrated by Mara herself, with the help of the one person in Nico's organization who'd believed her when she said staying meant death. For her. For the baby. Mara. Jacques' hiss cut through her spiraling thoughts. Table 7. Now. They've been waiting. I can't. Someone else should. You think I care about your excuses? Move. There was no arguing with Jacques when he used that tone. No explaining that serving table 7 meant walking into a nightmare. That the man sitting there had the power to unmake her with a single word. Mara forced her feet to move. Forced her face into the bland mask of professional courtesy she'd perfected over months of hiding. The distance between the bar and table 7 felt infinite and instantaneous. Don't look up. Don't meet his eye. Serve the water and disappear. But as she approached, some traitorous part of her drank in the details she'd tried so hard to forget. The way Nico's fingers drummed against the white tablecloth, a tell he didn't know he had. The rhythm always faster when he was thinking. The small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fight with his brother. The way he sat with his back to the wall, always watching, always calculating. Celeste spoke first, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. Finally. We were beginning to think we'd been forgotten. My apologies. Mara kept her eyes on the pitcher, on the glasses, on anything but the man who could shatter her carefully constructed lie. May I offer you water? How generous. Celeste's laugh was crystalline. What do you think, darling? Should we accept water from the help? Nico didn't respond. The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Mara poured anyway, muscle memory guiding her hands. Celeste's glass. Then the empty setting across from her. She was reaching for Nico's glass when his hand moved, not to accept the water, but to rest on the table, inches from hers. She saw the exact moment recognition flickered. His eyes caught on her wrist, on the small crescent-shaped scar that marked where she'd fallen through his greenhouse window during a party 8 months ago, laughing and wine-drunk and so stupidly in love. She'd bled on his imported Italian tile while he'd pressed a kitchen towel to the wound and threatened to fire his entire security team for not keeping the floor dry. Mara jerked her hand back, but the damage was done. Nico's gaze traveled up her arm, across her carefully neutral face, down to the swell of her belly beneath the black uniform. The universe held its breath. You, he said, and the single word carried the weight of continents shifting. Celeste's smile faltered. Darling, do you know this waitress? Mara's survival instinct screamed at her to run, to drop the pitcher and sprint for the kitchen, for the alley, for anywhere but here. But her body had turned to stone, frozen under the force of Nico's stare. I need to... Mara's voice cracked. Excuse me. She turned, but Nico's voice stopped her cold. Stay. Not a request. A command delivered with the absolute authority of a man accustomed to obedience. The dining room suddenly felt too small, too hot. Other diners were beginning to notice the tension crystallizing around table 7. Jacques was frowning from his position behind the bar. I have other tables, Mara managed. They can wait. Nico leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively casual. We haven't ordered yet. Celeste's hand found Nico's arm, her nails painted the color of fresh blood. Darling, what's going on? Nothing. But his eyes never left Mara's face. Just thought I recognized someone. The lie was transparent. They both knew it. Well, she's just a waitress, Celeste said with a dismissive wave. Surely we can find someone more attentive to take our order. Jacques appeared at Mara's elbow like a vulture sensing carrion. Is there a problem? No problem, Nico said smoothly, though I do have a specific request. Of course, Mr. Moreau. Anything. Mara's blood turned to ice. Jacques knew who he was. Of course he did. Everyone in Manhattan's underworld knew Nico Moreau, the youngest crime boss to ever control the Eastern Territories, the man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness and precision. I'd like this waitress, Nico gestured to Mara without looking away from her face, to handle our table personally for the remainder of the evening. Jacques practically bowed. Absolutely, Mara, you'll be attending exclusively to Mr. Moreau and his guest. No, this couldn't be happening. Actually, I should mention, Mara's voice came out strangled. I'm not feeling well. Perhaps someone else. You look perfectly healthy to me. Nico's smile was a blade wrapped in silk. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer to avoid our table. The trap closed around her like a fist. Celeste was watching now with new interest, her perfect features arranged in an expression of predatory curiosity. Jacques radiated impatience. And Nico, Nico looked at Mara like he was solving an equation, his brilliant mind working through possibilities and probabilities. No reason, Mara forced out. I'll be happy to serve you. Excellent. Nico picked up his menu, the gesture dismissive. We'll start with the oysters and the 2015 Margot. Jacques scurried away, leaving Mara alone with the wreckage of her careful plans. She managed to input the order on her tablet with shaking fingers, hyper-aware of Nico's attention like heat against her skin. You're pregnant, Celeste observed, her tone carrying the faintest edge of distaste. Shouldn't you be on maternity leave or something? I work until I can't, Mara said quietly. How admirable. Darling, don't you think that's admirable? Working while so obviously burdened. Nico said nothing. He was still watching Mara with that unsettling intensity, like he could peel back her skin and read the truth written on her bones. She retreated to the kitchen, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. This was impossible. She'd been so careful. 7 months of invisible survival, of being nobody in a city full of nobodies. How could one scar, one moment of carelessness, unravel everything? You good? Carlos, one of the line cooks, glanced up from his station. You look like you've seen a ghost. Close enough to the truth. I'm fine, just tired. You shouldn't be on your feet this much. Carlos had been kind to her since she'd started at Lenard Door, one of the few people who treated her like a human instead of a uniform. Seriously, Mara, that baby? I know. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the flutter of movement beneath her palm. I know. The sommelier arrived with the wine, and Mara carried it back to table 7 on a silver tray, her mind racing through contingencies. Maybe Nico wasn't sure. Maybe the scar was just a coincidence. Maybe if she kept her head down and her answers short, he'd lose interest. She presented the bottle, poured a taste for Nico's approval, filled both glasses with hands that only trembled slightly. Tell me, Nico said as she set down Celeste's glass, his voice pitched low enough that only Mara could hear. Do I know you? I don't think so, sir. Sir? He smiled, and it was terrible. So formal, but that scar on your wrist, it looks familiar. Mara's pulse became thunder. I'm sure lots of people have scars, sir. True. He swirled his wine, studying the dark liquid like it held answers. But not everyone has that particular scar. And that walk... His eyes flicked down, then up again. I knew someone once who moved exactly like you. Same grace, same careful control. Celeste's attention sharpened. Who? Someone dead, Nico said flatly. Or so I was told. The oysters arrived, saving Mara from having to respond. She arranged them on the table with mechanical precision, each movement calculated to avoid drawing further attention. But Nico wasn't finished. What's your name? He asked. Mara, sir. Mara. He tasted the syllables like wine. And your last name? Vale. A lie. Her real surname was Fletcher, but she'd abandoned it along with everything else from her old life. Vale was anonymous. Vale was safe. Except Nico's eyes narrowed slightly, and Mara knew with sick certainty that he'd caught the hesitation before she spoke. Interesting, was all he said. The evening stretched into a special kind of torture. Mara brought course after course, seared scallops, truffle risotto, dry-aged beef that cost more than her monthly rent. Each trip to table 7 felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Nico ordered with quiet authority, asked polite questions about the menu, played the role of wealthy patron perfectly, but underneath the civilized veneer Mara felt him hunting. Every casual question was a test. Every seemingly innocent observation was a probe. How long have you worked here? He asked over the beef course. 4 months. And before that? Other restaurants? Vague. Unhelpful. You're good at this. Very professional. His smile was winter sunlight, beautiful and cold. You must have excellent references. Mara's throat closed. She had no references. Jacques had hired her because the restaurant was understaffed and desperate, because she'd been willing to work brutal hours for minimum wage. I try my best, sir. Celeste, who'd been silent through most of the meal, suddenly leaned forward. Nico, darling, you're making the poor girl uncomfortable. Can't you see she's practically vibrating with anxiety? Am I making you uncomfortable? Nico asked Mara directly. No, sir. Liar. But he said it gently, almost fondly. Don't worry, I'm nearly finished. The words felt like a promise and a threat. By the time dessert arrived, a complicated affair involving chocolate and gold leaf, Mara's nerves were stripped raw. She placed the plates with extra care, desperate not to fumble and give Nico another reason to scrutinize her. That's when Celeste's phone buzzed. The woman glanced at the screen, her expression flickering through several emotions too quickly to read. Then she stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to powder my nose, she announced. Don't eat my dessert, darling. She swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume, leaving Mara alone with Nico. The silence stretched. Other diners laughed and clinked glasses. Jazz continued its lazy drift through the air. But at table 7, the world narrowed to 2 people, and a truth neither wanted to speak first. Sit down, Nico said quietly. I can't. I'm working. Sit down, command wrapped in velvet. Mara's legs gave out, depositing her in Celeste's abandoned chair. Across the table, Nico studied her with the focused intensity of a predator deciding whether to strike. You died, he said finally. 8 months ago, car accident on the West Side Highway. I went to your funeral. I stood over your casket and His jaw clenched. I grieved. Mara's hands twisted in her lap. I'm not who you think I am. Bullshit. The profanity was soft, almost tender. That scar, your walk, the way you chew your bottom lip when you're nervous, you're doing it right now. He leaned forward. You're Mara Fletcher. You worked for my uncle's art gallery. We met at a benefit auction, and you spilled champagne on my shoes. The memory rose unbidden, her horrified apology, his surprised laugh, the way the entire trajectory of her life had shifted in that moment. I'm just a waitress, Mara whispered, a waitress who's 7 months pregnant. His eyes dropped to her belly, and something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Is it mine? The question hung between them like smoke. Mara could have lied, should have lied, but under the weight of his stare, with months of secrets pressing against her chest, the truth escaped. Yes. The single word detonated like a grenade. Nico went absolutely still. Not the stillness of calm, but the terrible quiet before a storm. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. You're alive, pregnant, with my child. And you let me think you were dead? You had to what? The fury broke through his control, sharp and scalding. You think I wouldn't have protected you? Wouldn't have moved heaven and earth to keep you safe? That's exactly what I was afraid of. Explain. Mara's breath came in shallow gasps. 7 months of silence, of carrying this weight alone, and now it was all coming apart. Your father, she managed. He came to me after we told you about the baby, after you proposed. Nico's expression went arctic. What did he do? He gave me a choice. Leave quietly, stage my death, disappear, or, her voice cracked, or wake up one morning to find your child gone. An accident. A tragedy. Something I'd never see coming. That's insane. My father wouldn't... He had photos, Nico, of me grocery shopping, leaving work, sleeping in my apartment. He had people watching me for weeks before he made his move. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. He said you were destined for greater things, that a nobody from nowhere with no connections and no family worth mentioning would ruin everything he'd built. That the baby was leverage he couldn't allow to exist. Nico's hands had become fists on the white tablecloth. You should have told me. He played me a recording, you and him, arguing about the engagement. You said... Mara's throat closed around the memory. You said you'd been careless, that you never meant for things to go this far, that you needed to find a way out without damaging our business relationships. I never said that. I heard your voice. Then you heard what he wanted you to hear. Nico's fury was incandescent now. Edited, manipulated. My father is very good at creating convincing lies. Could it be true? Mara had dissected that recording 1,000 times in her mind, analyzing every word, every inflection. But she'd been so afraid, so alone. easy prey for manipulation. I couldn't risk it, she said quietly. Couldn't risk you, couldn't risk the baby. So I ran. And I made sure you'd never look for me. By dying. By disappearing. Nico pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor loud enough to draw attention from nearby diners. You have no idea what you've done. What you've cost me. I'm sorry. Sorry? His laugh was bitter. I've spent 8 months in hell. 8 months thinking I'd lost the only person who ever... He cut himself off, shaking his head. And now you're here, alive, pregnant, working in a restaurant where anyone could recognize you, where my father's people could walk through that door at any moment and finish what he started. Mara's blood ran cold. No one knows I'm here. I found you. How long before someone else does? The truth of it was a blade between her ribs. She'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she hadn't considered the larger picture, hadn't thought about what would happen when her carefully constructed invisibility finally failed. What do you want from me? She asked. The truth. All of it. Why you're still in Manhattan when you should have run to the other side of the world. Why you're working yourself to exhaustion when you should be... He stopped himself again. Just tell me everything. But before Mara could respond, Celeste reappeared. The woman's return was oddly timed, too perfect, too calculated. She slid back into her chair with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Did I miss anything? She asked. No, Nico said without looking at her. His attention remained locked on Mara. We were just discussing the menu. How fascinating. Celeste's smile sharpened. Well, I think we're finished here. Nico, darling, shall we go? We have that meeting with your father later. The mention of Nico's father made Mara's stomach turn to lead. Nico stood slowly, pulling out his wallet. He extracted several $100 bills and dropped them on the table. Far more than the meal cost, enough to make Jacques salivate when he saw it. For the excellent service, he said, his eyes never leaving Mara's face. And for your discretion. The last word was weighted with meaning. Of course, sir, Mara managed. Nico turned to leave, Celeste already linking her arm through his. But at the last moment, he leaned down, his mouth close to Mara's ear. This isn't over, he whispered. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., the bench in front of the gallery where we met. Come alone. And Mara. His breath was warm against her skin. If you run again, I will find you. And next time, you won't get a choice about staying. Then he was gone. Celeste chattering brightly about their upcoming trip to Monaco, the two of them disappearing into the rainy night like beautiful ghosts. Mara sat frozen in Celeste's abandoned chair, her heart a war drum, her mind a hurricane. He knew. He knew everything. And tomorrow, she'd have to face the consequences. Jacques appeared, snatching up the bills with greedy fingers. What did you do to earn this kind of tip? Nothing, Mara said numbly. Just my job. But as she cleared the table, as she moved through the rest of her shift on autopilot, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed life had just been sentenced to death. The restaurant closed at midnight. Mara changed out of her uniform in the staff bathroom, her body aching with exhaustion. The baby moved restlessly beneath her ribs, as if sensing her distress. It's okay, she whispered, pressing a hand to the swell of her belly. We're going to be okay. But the words felt like lies. The rain had turned to mist by the time she exited through the kitchen door into the alley. The city gleamed wet and dark, full of shadows that could hide anything. Anyone. Mara pulled her coat tight and started walking, her mind already racing through scenarios. She could run, pack her few belongings and catch a bus to somewhere, anywhere, that Nico couldn't find her. Could disappear again, more thoroughly this time. But even as she thought it, she knew it was futile. Nico Moreau didn't make idle threats. If he wanted her found, she'd be found. And running now would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Besides, a treacherous part of her, the part that had fallen in love with him in the first place, didn't want to run, wanted to believe his fury was born from grief, not anger at being deceived, wanted to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this nightmare together. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the car pulling alongside her until it was too late. The black SUV materialized from the mist like a shark from dark water. The window rolled down, and Mara's entire body locked with terror, preparing for bullets, or hands reaching to drag her inside. But the face that appeared belonged to Marco, Nico's longtime driver and occasional enforcer. "Get in," he said simply. "I don't... Mr. Moreau sent me to make sure you got home safely. You can accept the ride, or I can follow you at a distance and make us both uncomfortable. Your choice." Mara's first instinct was to refuse, to run, to do anything but climb into a car connected to Nico, but her feet hurt, her back ached, and the baby was pressing against her bladder with increasing insistence. She got in. The interior smelled like leather and rain. Marco said nothing as he pulled into traffic, his eyes on the road, his face professionally neutral.
"Where do you live?" he asked.
Mara gave him the address of her tiny studio in Washington Heights, hating that she was revealing another piece of information Nico could use. But there was no point in lying now, not when he'd already found her. They drove in silence through the glittering city. Mara watched the buildings slide past, each one a monument to wealth and power she'd never possess. This was Nico's world, a place where money and influence could reshape reality, where a word from the right person could make problems disappear. She'd been a fool to think she could hide here. "He didn't know," Marco said suddenly. Mara turned to look at him. "Mr. Moreau," Marco clarified, "about the baby, about his father's threats. He grieved for you, Mara. Really grieved. I've known him since he was a kid, and I've never seen him break like he did at your funeral." Guilt twisted in her chest. "I didn't have a choice. Maybe. Maybe not." Marco's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. "But you do now. And whatever happens next, you should know Nico isn't like his father. He doesn't make threats. He makes promises. And when he promised to protect you all those months ago, he meant it." The words settled over Mara like a weight. They pulled up outside her building, a crumbling pre-war walk-up, sandwiched between a laundromat and a bodega. Marco looked at the structure with barely concealed distaste. "This is where you've been living? It's what I can afford. It's a death trap." He shifted in his seat to face her fully. "Look, I don't know what your plan is, but that meeting tomorrow with Nico, you should go, hear him out, because the alternative, you disappearing again, trying to raise that baby alone in a place like this, that's not survival. That's slow-motion suicide." Mara's throat tightened. "Thanks for the ride." She climbed out before he could respond, before the truth of his words could burrow any deeper into her heart. Her apartment was on the 4th floor. No elevator, just stairs that groaned with every step. By the time she reached her door, she was breathing hard, her lower back screaming. Inside, the studio was exactly as she'd left it, sparse, clean, depressing in its functionality. A futon against one wall, a hot plate and mini fridge that served as her kitchen, a bathroom so small she had to angle herself to use the toilet. This was her life now. This was what she'd chosen over Nico's world. Mara sank onto the futon, pressing both hands to her belly. The baby kicked in response, a firm little thump against her palm. "Your father found us," she whispered to the movement beneath her skin. "And now I have no idea what happens next." Sleep didn't come easily. Mara lay awake as rain pattered against the single window, her mind churning through possibilities and fears. Every noise in the building made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. By the time dawn crept through the water-stained curtains, she'd made a decision. She'd meet Nico, hear what he had to say. And then she'd figure out if the man she'd loved was still somewhere inside the crime boss who'd cornered her at table 7, or if he'd become exactly what his father had always wanted him to be. The gallery looked exactly as Mara remembered it. A cathedral of glass and white walls on the corner of 5th and 63rd, where light fell through the atrium like liquid gold. She'd stood outside its doors 1,000 times in another life, back when she'd been someone who believed in futures and fairy tales. Now she stood there again, 7 months pregnant and terrified, watching the minutes tick toward 2 o'clock on her phone screen. The morning had crawled by with agonizing slowness. She'd called in sick to Lenardor, her voice hoarse with fabricated symptoms, while Jacques cursed her incompetence. She'd showered in lukewarm water because the building's boiler was broken again. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that accommodated her belly without making her look like she was trying too hard, as if clothes could armor her against what was coming. At 1:58, a familiar black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marco emerged first, scanning the street with professional paranoia before opening the rear door. Nico stepped out. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater today, No suit, no obvious weapons. Almost human. But Mara had learned long ago that Nico's most dangerous moments came wrapped in casual elegance. When he wanted to intimidate, he wore custom Italian tailoring. When he wanted to destroy, he dressed like he was meeting friends for coffee. Their eyes met across 20 feet of Manhattan sidewalk. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me much choice." There's always a choice. He gestured to the bench she remembered so well. Wrought iron, positioned perfectly to view the gallery's main installation through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Sit, please." Mara lowered herself onto the bench, grateful to be off her feet. The baby had been restless all morning, kicking and squirming like it could sense her anxiety. Nico sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that triggered a cascade of memories she'd spent months trying to suppress. Close enough to touch, if she were stupid enough to try. "Marco's watching," Nico said, nodding toward where the driver had positioned himself near the SUV. "No one approaches without him intercepting. We can talk freely." "About what?" "About why you're still in Manhattan. About why you didn't run somewhere my father couldn't find you." His voice was controlled, but Mara heard the razor edge beneath. "About how you've been living in a building that should be condemned, working yourself sick when you could have... Could have what?" The words escaped sharp and bitter. "Stayed? Let your father make good on his threats? I saw the photos, Nico. Pictures of me sleeping, of me buying groceries. Your father had people watching me for weeks before he ever approached. What was I supposed to do?" "Trust me." "With what? My life? Our baby's life?" She pressed a hand to her belly. "You can't protect against everything, and your father made it very clear that accidents happen. That mothers-to-be sometimes fall down stairs or get hit by cars or... Stop." Nico's jaw clenched. "Just stop. You're describing my father like he's some movie villain, but this is insane. He wouldn't... Wouldn't he?" Mara turned to face him fully. "Be honest, Nico, really honest. Would your father accept a nobody waitress with no connections and no use to the family business? Would he welcome the mother of his grandchild with open arms if she couldn't bring money or power or strategic advantage?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "That's what I thought," Mara said quietly. Nico stood abruptly, pacing 3 steps away before turning back. "The recording. The one my father played you. What exactly did you hear?" Mara closed her eyes, the words still acid clear in her memory. "You were arguing with him. He asked if you'd lost your mind, getting involved with someone so far beneath your station. You said it had gone further than you'd intended, that you'd been careless, that you needed to find a way to end it without damaging relationships with the Castellano family." "The Castellanos?" Nico's laugh was ugly. "Of course. He's been trying to marry me off to their daughter for years, strengthen the alliance, merge the territories." He raked a hand through his hair. "That recording was from 8 months ago, Mara, before I even met you. I was talking about ending a setup date my father had arranged." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're lying." "I'm not. And if you'd trusted me, if you'd come to me instead of running, I could have proven it." His eyes burned into hers. "My father is a master manipulator. He edits conversations, creates context that doesn't exist. It's how he's stayed in power for 30 years. Mara's hands trembled in her lap. Could it be true? Had she fled based on a lie constructed from truth? The recording had sounded so real, so damning, but Nico was right. She'd never verified it, never questioned whether the context was real. She'd been so afraid, so alone, easy prey for manipulation. "Even if that's true," she managed, "the threats weren't fabricated. He showed me pictures. He told me exactly what would happen if I didn't disappear. And you believed him. What choice did I have?" "You could have believed in me." The fury finally broke through Nico's control. "You could have trusted that I wouldn't let anyone, not my father, not anyone, hurt you or our child. But instead you staged your own death and let me grieve for 8 months. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Mara flinched from the raw pain in his voice. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the time I've lost. The first kicks, the first ultrasounds, watching you change as the baby grows." His voice cracked. "You stole that from me, Mara. You stole my child's first months of existence." Guilt crashed over her like a wave. He was right. Whatever her reasons, whatever her fears, she'd made choices that had hurt him deeply, had robbed him of something precious and irreplaceable. "I thought I was protecting us," she whispered. "By hiding in a death trap apartment and working double shifts while pregnant? That's not protection. That's punishment." Nico sat back down, his posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. "Where's the money I left you?" Mara's head snapped up. "What?" "The money. I had 50,000 transferred to your account 2 days before the accident. For the wedding, for setting up a home, for whatever you needed. Where is it?" "I never received any money." "That's impossible. Marco handled the transfer personally. I'm telling you, nothing came through. I checked my account obsessively for weeks after I left, thinking maybe you'd try to—" She stopped, realization dawning cold and terrible. "Your father." Nico's expression went arctic. He intercepted it. "Of course he did. He needed me desperate, vulnerable, easy to control." The pieces were sliding together now, forming a picture that made Mara's stomach turn. He probably planned the whole thing, waited until I was isolated and afraid, then offered his deal. Disappear or die. That son of a bitch. "So what now?" Mara asked. "You know the truth. You know I'm alive, that the baby's yours. What happens next?" Nico was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Come back with me. Let me move you somewhere safe, somewhere my father can't reach. I'll make sure you have everything you need, medical care, security, a real home." It was everything Mara had dreamed about in the early months of her pregnancy, when fear and loneliness had eaten her alive. But now, hearing it offered like a business transaction, something inside her recoiled. And what's the price? There's no price. There's always a price. She met his eyes steadily. "What do you want from me, Nico? Gratitude? Obedience? A convenient mother for your child who knows her place and doesn't make waves?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Isn't it? You're engaged to Celeste. You're planning mergers and alliances with your father. Where exactly do I fit into that picture?" "Celeste is business." Business. The word tasted like ash. "Is that what I was too before I became inconvenient? You know that's not true." "Do I?" Mara pushed herself to her feet, suddenly desperate for distance. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've moved on quite nicely. Got yourself a beautiful fiancé, kept the empire running, attended the right parties, and now here I am, pregnant and pathetic, and you're offering charity." "It's not charity. Then what is it?" "It's me trying to protect what's mine." The words came out raw and fierce. "That's my child you're carrying, my blood, my future, and I will not let my father or anyone else take that away from me again." The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it ignited something equally fierce in Mara's chest. "The baby isn't property," she said quietly, "and neither am I." "I know that." "Do you? Because it sounds like you're trying to collect us. Put us somewhere safe and controlled where we can't cause problems for your perfectly planned life." Nico stood, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. "You want to know what I want? I want to wake up knowing you're safe. I want to feel my child move under my hand. I want to stop seeing your casket every time I close my eyes." His voice dropped to something almost broken. "I want to stop grieving someone who isn't dead." Mara's breath caught. Before she could respond, Marco's voice cut through the moment. "Boss, we've got company." They both turned. A silver Mercedes had pulled up across the street, its windows tinted dark. No one emerged, but Mara felt the weight of observation like insects on her skin. "My father's people," Nico said flatly. "He must have had someone watching the gallery." "How did he know?" "He always knows." Nico's hand found the small of her back, protective and possessive. "We need to go. Now." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Mara, those men across the street, they're not here to talk. If my father knows you're alive, he'll act. Fast." "Then I'll run, like I did before." "And how well did that work out?" His grip tightened fractionally. "You ended up in a condemned building working yourself to death. What happens when the baby comes, when you're too weak to run anymore?" The baby chose that moment to kick, hard enough to make Mara gasp. Nico's eyes dropped to her belly, and something in his expression cracked. "Please," he said, and the single word carried more weight than any threat. Let me protect you, both of you. I'm not asking you to trust me forever, just for today. Just long enough to get you somewhere safe while I deal with my father." Mara's instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to build. But her body was exhausted, her resources nearly gone, and the men in the Mercedes weren't going to politely wait while she figured out her next move. "Fine," she heard herself say, "but I'm not making any promises about after. I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance." Marco had the SUV's door open before they reached it. Mara climbed in, Nico following close behind. The vehicle pulled into traffic smoothly, but through the rear window, Mara saw the Mercedes execute a tight U-turn. "They're following," she said. "Let them." Nico's phone was already in his hand. "Marco, take the long route. I need to make some calls." What followed was a masterclass in controlled fury. Nico made 3 calls in rapid succession, his voice never rising above conversational, but each word edged in steel. The first was to someone named Victor, ordering increased security at multiple locations. The second was to his lawyer, demanding documentation of the intercepted money transfer. The third was to his father. "We need to talk," Nico said when the call connected. "Today, your office. 1 hour." Mara couldn't hear the response, but she saw Nico's expression harden. "I'm not asking your permission, and before you make any more stupid decisions, you should know that Mara's with me, under my protection. So whatever you're planning, whatever orders you've already given, cancel them. Now." He ended the call with enough force to crack the phone screen. "That was subtle," Mara said. "Subtle doesn't work with my father. He respects power and nothing else." Nico turned to her, his eyes storm dark. "I need to know everything he said to you. Every threat, every detail. Can you do that?" Mara nodded slowly. As the SUV navigated through midtown traffic, she recounted the conversation with Nico's father. The photos, the implied threats, the manufactured recording, the ultimatum. Nico listened with absolute focus, his jaw progressively tighter with each revelation. "He used your love for me against you," Nico said when she finished. "Made you believe leaving was the only way to keep the baby safe. Classic manipulation. It worked. Because you were alone and afraid, and he's very good at exploiting weakness." Nico's hand found hers, his grip warm and solid. "But you're not alone anymore, and I promise you, Mara, he will answer for this." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever's necessary." "Nico, he threatened my child. Threatened the woman I—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "There are lines you don't cross. He crossed them all." The SUV pulled up in front of a building Mara didn't recognize, a modern high-rise in Tribeca with the kind of security that suggested important people lived inside. Marco opened the door, his eyes scanning the street with professional paranoia. "Penthouse is secure," he told Nico. "I've got men on every exit." "Good. No one comes up without my explicit approval. Not my father, not his people, no one." Mara let Nico guide her into the building, through a lobby of polished marble and modern art, into an elevator that required both a keycard and fingerprint scan. They rose in silence, Mara's ears popping as they climbed. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected, vast and minimalist, all floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. The kind of space that whispered money in every carefully chosen detail. And yet, despite the luxury, it felt strangely impersonal, like a hotel room dressed up as a home. "This is where you live?" Mara asked. "Sometimes. I have other properties." Nico moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking windows, adjusting blinds. "But this is the most secure. My father doesn't have access, and the building's security is former military." He disappeared into what Mara assumed was a bedroom, returning with a phone and laptop. "I need to handle some things before I meet with my father. Make yourself comfortable. There's food in the kitchen, and the guest room is down the hall if you need to rest." "You're just going to leave me here?" "You're safe here, safer than you've been in months." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Unless you'd rather I stay." The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to explore. "Go," Mara said. "Deal with your father, but Nico—" She waited until his eyes met hers. "Don't do anything stupid. That baby needs a father, not a martyr." His smile was brief and sharp. I'll be back in a few hours. Try not to run away again while I'm gone." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with expensive finality. Mara stood alone in the vast penthouse, her reflection ghostly in the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, Manhattan sprawled in every direction, a kingdom of ambition and cruelty where people like Nico ruled and people like her barely survived. She moved through the space slowly, cataloging details. The kitchen was pristine and barely used. The living room held abstract paintings that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. The guest bedroom was decorated in shades of gray and white, sterile as a hotel. But it was the master bedroom that stopped her cold. On the nightstand, positioned carefully beside an expensive watch and a half-empty glass of whiskey, sat a photograph. Mara recognized it immediately. The two of them at a charity gala 6 months before her death, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. She was wearing the emerald dress Nico had bought her, the one that had made her feel like a princess playing dress-up. She looked happy. They both did. Mara picked up the photo with shaking hands. The frame was expensive silver, slightly tarnished as if handled frequently. As if Nico had held this photograph over and over, staring at a ghost who wasn't really dead. The guilt nearly drove her to her knees. She'd been so focused on survival, on protecting the baby, that she hadn't truly considered what her disappearance had cost him. Had convinced herself that Nico would move on quickly, that powerful men like him didn't grieve for long. But this photograph, positioned where he'd see it every night before sleeping, told a different story. Mara set the frame down carefully and retreated to the living room, her mind churning. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the city in shades of amber and shadow. In a few hours, Nico would return from his confrontation with his father. And then what? She couldn't go back to her apartment. Nico was right about that. It was a death trap, and now that his father knew she was alive, staying there was suicide. But she couldn't just surrender her independence either. Couldn't let herself become another possession in Nico's collection. The baby kicked, as if offering an opinion. "I know," Mara whispered to the movement beneath her ribs. Nothing's ever simple with him. She must have dozed off on the leather couch because the next thing she knew, voices were echoing through the penthouse. Harsh, angry, coming from the direction of the front door. Mara struggled upright, her heart pounding. Through the dim light of early evening, she could make out two figures in the entryway. Nico, his posture rigid with fury, and a woman whose voice cut through the air like broken glass. Celeste. "You can't just keep her here like some kind of pet," Celeste was saying. "This is insane, even for you." "Get out." Nico's voice was arctic. "Not until you explain what the hell is going on. Your father calls me in a rage, saying you've lost your mind over some dead waitress. She's not dead. Obviously. But she's also not your concern anymore. We have an understanding, Nico. An arrangement. And this," Celeste gestured wildly, "this violates everything we agreed to. The arrangement is over. Like hell it is. My family has invested too much in this alliance to—" "I don't care what your family invested. The engagement is done. Finished. I'll make the announcement tomorrow." Celeste's laugh was vicious. "You think you can just walk away? You think my father will accept that? We have contracts, Nico. Legally binding agreements about territory and distribution, and then sue me. You arrogant—" That's when Celeste noticed Mara standing in the living room doorway. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, with calculation. "So this is her," Celeste said softly. "The ghost who won't stay buried." Mara lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "I didn't ask to be here." "No, I'm sure you didn't." "Sure you just accidentally ended up in my fiancé's penthouse, pregnant with his child, destroying months of carefully negotiated agreements." Celeste's smile was a blade. "How unfortunate for everyone." "Celeste, leave. Now." Nico moved between the two women, his body language protective. "Or what? You'll have your pet thug throw me out?" Celeste's voice rose. "I came here as a courtesy, Nico, to warn you. My father knows about her, about the baby, and he's not happy about threats to our arrangement." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your little reunion has consequences. My father doesn't like surprises. And when he called earlier asking me to confirm whether the pregnant waitress from last night was someone you knew," she paused meaningfully, "I told him the truth, that I had no idea who she was. Ice crystallized in Mara's veins. You called your father? I texted him from the restaurant. Just a simple question about whether Nico had any old flames I should know about. Celeste's smile was poison. He was very interested in the details. Nico went absolutely still. What did you do? What you forced me to do. Protect my family's interests. Celeste pulled out her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen. And speaking of protection, she held up the phone so they could both see the screen. A text thread with someone labeled cleanup. The most recent message, sent hours ago, read, "Found the target, awaiting confirmation." Below it, a photo. Mara's apartment building. You... Nico's voice was deadly quiet. You sent a cleaner after her. I sent insurance, in case your temporary insanity threatened to become permanent. Celeste pocketed the phone. But don't worry, I called them off. For now. Consider it a wedding gift. There's not going to be a wedding. Then consider it incentive to reconsider. Celeste moved toward the door, her heels clicking against marble. You have 24 hours, Nico. Announce that the engagement stands, send the waitress away with enough money to keep her quiet, and we all move forward. Or, she glanced back at Mara, or accidents happen. Pregnant women are so delicate, after all. So many things can go wrong. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Get out, Nico said. I'm already gone. But Nico? Celeste paused in the doorway. You should know my father isn't the only one who's interested in your little reunion. Your father called mine earlier. They're meeting tonight to discuss the situation. I'd suggest you think very carefully about which battles you're willing to fight. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with quiet finality. Mara sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. She sent someone to kill me. She sent someone to scare you. But Nico's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. The Rourke family deals in intimidation, not murder. Usually. Usually. Celeste is ambitious and ruthless, but she's not stupid. Killing you would start a war she can't win. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. But I'm not taking chances. Marco, I need you to send a team to Mara's apartment. Full sweep. If there's anyone watching the building, I want them gone. And check for... He paused, glancing at Mara. Check for anything that doesn't belong. Bombs. He meant bombs. Or poison. Or any of 1,000 ways to make murder look like accident. This is insane, Mara whispered. This whole situation is insane. People sending killers, making threats, playing games with lives like it's all just business. It is business. Nico sat beside her, his proximity both comfort and threat. In my world, everything is leverage. Family, love, children, all of it gets weighed on scales of power and profit. Then maybe I was right to run. Maybe you were. His honesty surprised her. Maybe this life, this world I was born into, maybe it's poison. Maybe everyone who touches it gets corrupted. He turned to face her fully. But I can't change what I am, Mara. I can't rewrite my history or abandon my responsibilities. All I can do is try to protect the people I care about from the worst of it. By keeping them locked in expensive cages? By keeping them alive. His hand found her belly, tentative and aching. I lost you once. I'm not losing you, or our child again. The baby kicked against his palm, as if recognizing its father's touch. Nico's breath caught, his eyes going wide with wonder. That's your daughter, Mara said softly. Or son. I don't know yet. Didn't want to find out alone. Daughter. Nico's voice cracked on the word. I hope it's a daughter, with your eyes and your stubbornness and none of my father's cruelty. She'll have your intelligence, your loyalty. My capacity for violence? Your capacity for love. They sat in silence, Nico's hand still pressed to the swell of her belly, both of them feeling the life that connected them across all the lies and fear and loss. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in the geometric dance of the city. What happens now? Mara finally asked. Now I go to war. Nico stood, his expression hardening. With my father, with Celeste's family, with anyone who thinks they can threaten what's mine. I know, you're not mine. You're your own person with your own choices. He moved toward the door, grabbing his jacket. But that baby? That's my blood. My future. And I will burn this entire city down before I let anyone hurt them. The ferocity in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it ignited something equally fierce in Mara's chest. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. Not the polished crime boss or the dutiful son, but the one who loved with volcanic intensity, who chose his people and defended them without mercy. Where are you going? To have a conversation with my father, one that's 8 months overdue. Nico paused at the door. Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone. Marco's men are outside and I'll be back before midnight. And if you're not? His smile was sharp and terrible. Then you take the emergency cash in the bedroom safe, code is your birthday, and you run. As far and fast as you can. Because if I don't come back, it means I've lost. And you don't want to be anywhere near this city when my father wins. Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone with her fear and the baby's restless movements and the terrible certainty that the war she'd been running from had finally caught up with them all. The hours crawled by like wounded things. Mara paced the penthouse, her hands pressed to her belly, her mind conjuring 1,000 scenarios of violence and failure. Every car horn from the street below made her flinch. Every creak of the building settling sent adrenaline spiking through her veins. At 9 o'clock, she tried calling Nico. The phone rang twice before going to voicemail. At 10, she tried again, straight to voicemail this time. By 11, she was standing at the bedroom safe, her fingers hovering over the keypad. Her birthday. He'd made the code her birthday, as if even in planning for catastrophe, he'd wanted some piece of her embedded in his life. She didn't open it, not yet. But knowing it was there, knowing he'd given her an escape route, even as he'd asked her to stay, made something in her chest ache. At 11:47, the penthouse door burst open. Mara spun, her heart in her throat, expecting violence. But it was Nico who stumbled through, his white shirt stained with blood, his knuckles split and raw. Marco followed close behind, supporting Nico's weight, his own face grim. What happened? Mara rushed forward, her hands already reaching for Nico's face, checking for injuries. You're bleeding. Not my blood. Mostly. Nico caught her hands, his grip tight enough to bruise. I'm fine. We need to go. Now. Go where? What happened with your father? Later. Right now we need to move. He was already pulling her toward the door, his movements sharp with urgency. Nico, stop. Talk to me. He turned, and the look in his eyes froze her blood. Fury. Fear. Determination bordering on madness. My father didn't come alone to our meeting, Nico said, the words coming fast and clipped. He brought the Rourkes, Celeste's father and 2 of his enforcers. They were planning an intervention. Lock me in a room until I agreed to honor the engagement and make you disappear permanently. But you got out. I got out. His smile was terrible. Victor and his team were waiting outside. My father didn't expect me to bring my own security to a family discussion. Things got messy. Marco spoke up from the doorway. Boss dropped 3 of them himself before we could intervene. The Rourkes retreated, but they're not going to let this slide. And your father, my father is alive but humiliated, Nico finished, which makes him more dangerous than ever. He won't stop now. Can't stop. His authority is threatened. His alliances are fracturing. He'll come at us with everything he has. Mara's mind raced, trying to process the implications. So we run? We disappear. For a few days at least. Give me time to regroup, call in favors, rebuild from a position of strength. Nico was already moving through the penthouse, grabbing his laptop, his phone, stuffing items into a bag with practiced efficiency. I have a place upstate, off the grid. No one knows about it except Marco and Victor. What about Celeste? She'll tell her father where we're going. Celeste doesn't know where we're going. No one does. He stopped, turning to face her fully. But I need you to trust me, Mara. One more time. Can you do that? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd been through. Every lie, every fear, every moment of desperate survival. Mara pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby's restless movements. This child, their child, deserved better than a life spent running, deserved parents who fought for each other instead of against the world. Yes, she heard herself say. I trust you. The relief that crossed Nico's face was almost painful to witness. Okay. He grabbed her hand, his grip warm and solid. Okay, let's go. They took the service elevator down to the parking garage, Marco leading with his gun drawn, checking corners with professional paranoia. The SUV was waiting, engine already running, Victor behind the wheel. We clear? Nico asked as they climbed in. For now. But the Rourkes have people watching the building. They'll know we've moved as soon as we exit the garage. Then we give them something to chase. Nico pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'm having Marco take the primary vehicle north on the FDR. Full escort, lights, the whole show. They'll think we're making a run for Connecticut. And where will we actually be? Mara asked. Going south. There's a boat waiting at the Brooklyn docks. We take that upriver, switch to a car Victor has staged, and we're gone before anyone realizes they've been chasing a decoy. It was the kind of plan that only worked if everyone played their part perfectly. If no one made mistakes, if luck held and violence didn't find them first. They were banking everything on a lot of ifs. The SUV pulled out of the garage, Victor navigating through the late-night streets with controlled aggression. Behind them, Mara could see another black vehicle peel away from the curb, following at a distance. Company, she said quietly. I see them. Victor's eyes never left the road. 2 cars, probably Rourke muscle. They're not trying to hide. Let them follow. Once we split, Marco will lead them on a nice long drive to nowhere. They drove in tense silence through Manhattan's glittering canyons, every stoplight an eternity, every turn a potential ambush. Mara's hands twisted in her lap, her breath coming shallow and quick. Nico's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. The baby can feel your stress. The baby can feel a lot of things right now. Terror, confusion, regret about her parents' life choices. Despite everything, Nico's laugh was genuine. She'll have stories to tell someday. How her mother was the bravest person I ever met. How she survived impossible odds. Or how her parents got her killed before she was even born. That's not going to happen. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I swear to you, Mara, on everything I am, I will not let anyone hurt our daughter. The SUV turned onto a side street, the buildings growing more industrial, the lights sparser. They were in Brooklyn now, heading toward the waterfront, where shipping containers stacked like giant building blocks, and the river ran dark and cold. Victor pulled into an abandoned warehouse lot, killing the lights. Through the windshield, Mara could see water glinting in the moonlight and the silhouette of a small boat tied to a crumbling dock. This is us, Nico said. Victor, you're sure the route is clear? As sure as I can be, but boss... Victor met Nico's eyes in the rearview mirror. The Castellanos are asking questions. Word is spreading about what happened tonight. If they decide to get involved, then I'll deal with them. Right now, getting Mara to safety is the only thing that matters. They exited the SUV quickly, Nico's hand steady on Mara's back as they crossed the uneven ground toward the dock. The boat was small but powerful, designed for speed rather than comfort. Victor helped Mara aboard while Nico conferred in low tones with Marco, who'd arrived minutes earlier in the decoy vehicle. The tail is still following me, Marco confirmed. I'll lead them north, keep them busy for at least an hour. That should give you enough of a head start. Be careful, the Rourkes aren't subtle when they're angry. I've handled worse. Marco clasped Nico's hand briefly. Take care of her, boss. And yourself. Then Marco was gone, his taillights disappearing into the industrial maze, and Nico was climbing aboard the boat, his movements efficient despite his injuries. You know how to drive this thing? Mara asked as he moved to the controls. I grew up on boats. My father used to own a yacht before he decided maritime transport was beneath him. Nico's hands moved over switches and throttles with practiced ease. Hold on. The river's choppy tonight. The engine roared to life, and suddenly they were moving, cutting through dark water, the city's lights falling away behind them. Mara gripped the railing, her stomach lurching with each wave, the baby protesting the sudden motion with a series of sharp kicks. How far? She shouted over the engine noise. 20 minutes to the rendezvous point, then another hour by car to the safe house. 20 minutes, an hour, and then what? How long could they hide before Nico's father or the Rourkes or some other player in this deadly game found them? The river opened up around them, wider and darker than Mara had imagined. To To their left, Manhattan's skyline blazed like a circuit board. To their right, industrial wasteland gave way to suburbs and darkness. Above, stars struggled to penetrate the city's light pollution. They were 15 minutes into the journey when Victor's voice crackled over Nico's phone, tinny and urgent. "Boss, we have a problem." Nico snatched up the device, his knuckles white on the throttle. "What kind of problem?" "The warehouse lot. Someone was watching it. They saw you board the boat." "How many?" "At least 2 vehicles. And boss, one of them is your brother's car." Nico's expression went absolutely rigid. "Evan? He's been calling me for the last hour. Says your father sent him to bring Mara in. Says if he doesn't deliver her by morning, your father will start killing people close to you, family, friends. Anyone he thinks will make you cooperate." The words landed like grenades. "That manipulative bastard," Nico breathed. "He's using Evan as a weapon, forcing him to choose between family loyalty and—" He cut himself off, scanning the dark water around them. "Can you tell where they're headed?" "North on the river. They're trying to intercept you." "How fast?" "Fast enough. Boss, you need to abort. Turn around, come back, we'll find another route." "No." Nico's jaw set in a line Mara recognized, the expression he wore when calculation turned to conviction. "We keep going, but we're changing the plan." "Nico, there's an old loft in Red Hook, condemned building, scheduled for demolition next month. You know the one?" A pause. "The place you were going to renovate?" Before Victor stopped, recalibrating. "Yeah, I know it. Meet us there. Bring weapons and medical supplies. And Victor?" Nico's voice dropped. "Bring Evan too. It's time we had a family discussion." He ended the call and pushed the throttle forward, the boat leaping across the dark water with renewed speed. "That building," Mara said over the engine roar. "The one you mentioned. You were going to renovate it." "I bought it 8 months ago." Nico's eyes remained fixed on the water ahead. "Was going to turn it into a private space, away from my father's world, somewhere quiet where we could—" He stopped, the words lodging in his throat. "Where we could build a life," Mara finished quietly. "Yeah, stupid, I know, planning for futures that don't exist." "It's not stupid. It's hope." The boat cut through the darkness, Manhattan falling away behind them while Brooklyn's industrial waterfront rose ahead. Nico navigated by memory and moonlight, steering them toward a crumbling dock that looked ready to collapse into the river. "This is it," he said, killing the engine. "Help me tie off." They secured the boat quickly, Mara's hands clumsy with cold and fear. The dock groaned under their weight as they climbed onto solid ground, every plank threatening to give way. Ahead, barely visible in the ambient light from distant street lamps, stood the loft. 4 stories of brick and broken windows, wrapped in chain-link fence and plastered with demolition notices. It looked like the set of a horror movie, isolated, derelict, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one heard the screams. "You were going to renovate this?" Mara asked. "It has good bones, natural light, river views." Nico's smile was brief and sad. "I saw potential where everyone else saw ruin. Story of my life." He led her to a gap in the fence, holding the wire aside so she could slip through. Inside the building, the air smelled of mold and decay. Nico pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to navigate through the debris-strewn ground floor. "Upstairs," he said. "The 3rd floor still has intact windows and a clear view of the street. We'll be able to see them coming." The stairs were a death trap of rotted wood and missing railings. Nico went first, testing each step, his hand reaching back to steady Mara as she climbed. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, she was breathing hard, her back screaming in protest. The space opened up into what must have once been a beautiful loft, exposed brick, high ceilings, massive windows overlooking the river. Now it was a graveyard of abandoned furniture and water damage, moonlight streaming through broken glass to paint everything in shades of silver and shadow. "Here." Nico guided her to a relatively clean section of floor near the windows. "Sit. Rest. Victor will be here soon." Mara lowered herself carefully, her entire body aching. "What's the plan?" "We wait. We see what Evan wants, and we figure out if my brother is here as family or as my father's enforcer." "And if it's the latter?" Nico's expression was unreadable. Then we do what we have to do to survive. They waited in tense silence. Nico positioned near the window where he could watch the street. Mara huddled against the wall with her hands pressed to her belly. The baby had gone still, as if sensing the danger, and the lack of movement terrified her more than the kicks had. 20 minutes passed. 30. Then headlights cut through the darkness below. "Victor," Nico said. "And someone else." The second vehicle pulled up behind the first, and even from 3 stories up, Mara could make out the distinctive shape of Evan Moreau as he climbed from the driver's seat. Younger than Nico by several years, with the same dark hair and brutal elegance, but softer features. Less certainty in the way he moved. Victor and Evan stood in the street, talking in low tones Mara couldn't hear. Then Victor pointed toward the building, and both men started walking toward the entrance. "They're coming up," Nico said quietly. His hand had moved to the gun at his back. A gesture so subtle Mara almost missed it. Footsteps echoed through the building, growing louder as the 2 men climbed. When they finally appeared at the 3rd-floor landing, Victor had his own weapon drawn, positioned slightly behind Evan as if ready to intervene. "Nico," Evan said, his voice careful. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "I didn't agree to anything." Victor made an executive decision. Nico's posture was combat-ready, every muscle tensed for violence. "What do you want, Evan?" "To talk. Just talk." Evan's eyes found Mara, widening slightly. "So it's true. You're alive." "Disappointed?" Mara asked. "Confused. Father told us you died, showed us police reports, witness statements, everything." He looked back at Nico. "He lied to all of us. Not the first time. Won't be the last." Nico's hand hadn't moved from his gun. "Father sent you to bring her in, so here we are. What happens now?" Evan's jaw tightened. "He gave me an ultimatum. Deliver Mara by dawn, or he starts making examples. He's already sent people to pick up Marco's sister, and that cook from Lanardor who helped you escape, Carlos, I think his name was. They took him an hour ago." Ice crystallized in Mara's chest. "Carlos? He doesn't have anything to do with this. He helped you. That's enough for Father." Evan's voice was hollow. "He's going to hurt innocent people until Nico falls in line. Until you surrender." "Then I'll surrender," Mara said, starting to stand. "No." Nico's command was absolute. "You're not going anywhere near him. But Carlos knew the risks when he helped us, and Marco's sister is under Victor's protection. They're safe." Nico turned his full attention to Evan. "The real question is why you're here. If you wanted to bring Mara in, you could have brought Father's men, could have surrounded this building and forced our hand. But you came alone with only Victor as backup. Why?" Evan was quiet for a long moment, his expression warring between loyalty and conscience. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, with something that sounded like grief. "Because I'm tired of being his weapon. Tired of hurting people because he demands it. Tired of watching him destroy everything decent in our family." He met Nico's eyes steadily. "I'm here because you're my brother, and because that woman you're protecting is carrying my nephew or niece, and because Father needs to be stopped before he burns everything down." The words hung in the air like a prayer. "You're choosing sides," Nico said carefully. "I'm choosing family, real family, not the empire Father built on blood and fear." Victor lowered his weapon slightly, his expression cautiously hopeful. Nico remained rigid, his brilliant mind clearly working through possibilities and probabilities, looking for the trap. "How do I know this isn't another manipulation?" Nico asked. "How do I know Father didn't send you here to gain my trust before stabbing me in the back?" "You don't." Evan spread his hands, weaponless and vulnerable. "All I can offer is my word. And the fact that I've been helping Victor track Father's movements for the last 3 hours. That's how I knew about Carlos and Marco's sister. Father doesn't know I'm feeding information to your people." "That's a death sentence if he finds out." "I know." Evan's smile was bitter. "But I'm already dead if I keep following his orders. At least this way, I die for something that matters." Mara watched the 2 brothers face each other across the rotting loft floor, years of complicated history written in their expressions. Nico, the eldest son who'd borne the weight of expectation and responsibility. Evan, the younger brother who'd lived in that shadow, trying to earn approval that would never come. What's Father's endgame? Nico finally asked. Total control. He's meeting with the Rourkes and the Castellanos tomorrow night. Some kind of signing ceremony to formalize the new alliance. Once that's done, he'll have enough combined power to crush any opposition, including you. Where's the meeting? The Rourke estate in the Hamptons. Midnight. He's calling it a celebration, but it's really a consolidation of power. Your removal from succession. My promotion to heir. Evan's voice was hollow. He's rewriting the entire family structure to cut you out. Then we rewrite it first. Nico's expression had shifted from suspicion to calculation. If we can disrupt that meeting, expose what Father's really doing, turn the Castellanos against him, we'd be starting a war. We're already in a war. We just haven't been fighting back. Evan nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Everything you know about the meeting, security, attendees, timing, and… Nico paused, his expression softening fractionally. And I need to know you're truly in this, because once we move against Father, there's no going back. He'll come for both of us. I know. Evan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I'm in, Nico, all the way. Whatever it takes to end this. The two brothers clasped hands, and something in Mara's chest eased slightly. Maybe they had a chance. Maybe with Evan's inside knowledge and Nico's strategic brilliance, they could actually survive this. The moment shattered when gunfire erupted from the street below. Victor dove for cover, his weapon already returning fire. Nico grabbed Mara, pulling her away from the windows as glass exploded inward. Evan hit the floor, cursing viciously. Snipers! Victor shouted. At least 3 positions. They must have followed me. Or me, Evan cut in grimly. Father probably had me tracked. More gunfire. The distinctive crack of high-powered rifles. Mara pressed herself against the wall, Nico's body covering hers, his arms wrapped around her belly protectively. We need to move, Nico said. This building won't hold. Those walls are basically paper. Where, see? Mara asked. We're surrounded. The basement. There's an old smuggler's tunnel that connects to the building next door. If we can reach it before they breach… An explosion rocked the building's ground floor. Not a bomb, but something close. Maybe a grenade, maybe shaped charges. Whatever it was, the entire structure groaned in protest. They're coming in, Victor reported. Multiple hostiles, military formation. Then we fight our way out. Nico turned to Evan. You still in? Evan picked up a fallen piece of rebar, testing its weight. To the end. Good. Nico pulled his gun, checking the magazine. Victor, you lead. Get Mara to that tunnel. Evan and I will hold the stairs. Nico… Mara grabbed his arm, terror flooding her veins. You can't… I can and I will. He kissed her forehead, quick and fierce. Trust me. One more time. Then he was gone, moving with Victor and Evan toward the stairwell, leaving Mara alone in the shattered loft with moonlight and gunfire for company. She heard the first exchange of gunfire from the floor below, heard Nico's voice shouting commands, heard the wet sound of bullets finding flesh and the screams that followed. Victor reappeared, his face grim. Come on, we need to move now. What about Nico? He's buying us time. Don't waste it. Mara forced herself to move, following Victor down a different stairwell, her hands pressed to her belly as if she could shield the baby from the violence erupting around them. The basement was pitch black, smelling of rot and river water. Victor used his phone's flashlight to illuminate a section of collapsed wall. Through there, he said. The tunnel's on the other side. It'll take you to the building next door. There's a car waiting in the back alley. Keys under the mat. Drive north. There's a cabin in the Adirondacks. Address is programmed into the GPS. Wait there. What about you? What about Nico? We'll find you, but if we don't… Victor pressed something into her hand. A phone. That has one number programmed. Use it only if absolutely necessary. The person on the other end will make sure you and the baby disappear, permanently. I'm not leaving without… You are. Victor's grip on her shoulders was almost painful, because that baby is the only thing Nico cares about more than revenge. If you die, he'll have nothing left to lose, and a Moreau with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in this city. More gunfire from above. Closer now, accompanied by the thunder of boots on stairs. Go! Victor shoved her toward the hole in the wall. Now! Mara went, squeezing through the gap, her belly barely fitting, emerging into darkness on the other side. Behind her, she heard Victor returning to the fight, heard him shouting warnings to Nico and Evan. The tunnel was exactly as horrible as she'd imagined. Low-ceilinged, water-slicked, the walls closing in like a throat. Mara crawled on hands and knees, her breath coming in gasps, the baby protesting every jarring movement. She didn't know how long she crawled. Time became elastic in the darkness, stretching and compressing. But eventually she saw light ahead, a gap in the tunnel's end, leading to another basement. Mara pulled herself through, emerging into a space marginally less horrifying than the one she'd left. Stairs led upward. She climbed them on trembling legs, found herself in an abandoned restaurant kitchen, and beyond that, a back door opening onto an alley. The car was there. A nondescript sedan with New York plates. Keys under the mat, just like Victor had said. Mara slid behind the wheel, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the ignition. The engine turned over on the first try, and she was moving, pulling out of the alley, the building where Nico was fighting falling away behind her. She'd made it 2 blocks when the explosion lit up the night sky. The shockwave hit her car a second later, strong enough to make the vehicle shudder. In her rearview mirror, flames climbed into the night, orange and terrible against the black sky. The loft was gone, collapsed into rubble and fire. And somewhere in that inferno, Nico and Evan and Victor were either fighting for their lives or already dead. Mara pulled over, her hands frozen on the wheel, her mind unable to process what she'd just witnessed. She should drive, should follow Victor's instructions, should get as far from this nightmare as possible. But the phone in her pocket felt like a lead weight, and the baby had gone absolutely still. "Please," Mara whispered to the life inside her. "Please move. Please be okay." A kick. Weak but present. Mara's breath came out in a sob of relief. She looked at the GPS at the route to the Adirondacks plotted in glowing lines. Looked at the phone Victor had given her. Looked in her rearview mirror at the flames consuming everything she'd tried to build and run from and protect. Then she made a choice. She turned the car around and drove back toward the fire, toward the violence, toward the man who'd promised to protect her and might already be dead. Because some things were worth more than survival. Some things were worth fighting for. The street was chaos when Mara pulled up. Fire trucks screaming toward the inferno, police cordoning off blocks, civilians streaming out of nearby buildings with terror written across their faces. The loft was a skeleton of itself, flames pouring from every window like the building was bleeding light. Mara abandoned the car 2 blocks away and ran, her pregnant body protesting every step, her lungs burning with smoke and fear. A police officer tried to stop her at the barricade, but she ducked under his arm, driven by something beyond reason. "Nico!" Her scream was swallowed by sirens and the roar of the fire. "Nico!" She was 50 feet from the building when strong arms caught her from behind, dragging her backward. "Stop! You can't go in there!" Victor's voice, rough with smoke damage. Mara twisted in his grip, her eyes finding his face, soot-stained, bleeding from a gash above his eyebrow, but alive. "Where is he? Where's Nico?" "Safe. He got out with Evan through a service exit, but we need to move before the police start asking questions we can't answer." Victor guided her away from the flames, toward an alley where Marco waited beside another SUV. "The people who attacked us," Mara asked, as Victor bundled her into the back seat. "Dead or gone. It was a cleanup squad, not a capture team. They weren't expecting us to fight back as hard as we did." Victor slid in beside her, his breathing labored. "Your man is a hell of a tactician. Brought the whole building down on their heads." "That was intentional? Improvised, but effective." Victor pressed a cloth to the wound on his forehead. "Marco, the safe house in Queens, and call ahead. Tell them we need medical supplies and a doctor who doesn't ask questions." The SUV pulled into traffic, navigating around emergency vehicles with practiced ease. Mara's hands wouldn't stop shaking, adrenaline still flooding her system, the baby doing somersaults that felt both reassuring and alarming. "How bad is he hurt?" she asked quietly. "Cuts, bruises, possible cracked ribs? Nothing fatal, but he needs stitches and rest." Victor's expression softened marginally. "He's going to be pissed you came back instead of running north." "He can be as pissed as he wants. I'm not abandoning him again." "Good, because that man has been half dead since you disappeared. Tonight's the first time I've seen real fire in him in months. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. We have a problem. Another one? The explosion made the news. Every major outlet is running the story, and someone leaked photos of Nico at the scene before the building came down. He turned the phone so Mara could see. A grainy image of Nico helping Evan through rubble, his face clearly visible despite the smoke. His father is going to know he survived, so will the Rourkes, which means they'll be looking for him. For all of us. Victor pocketed the phone. The safe house will buy us a few hours at most. After that, we need a real plan. The safe house turned out to be a modest brick townhouse in Astoria, unremarkable enough to fade into the neighborhood. Marco pulled into a narrow garage, the door closing automatically behind them. They entered through a reinforced door into a basement that had been converted into something between a bunker and a medical clinic. Nico was there, slumped in a chair while a woman with gray hair and steady hands cleaned a gash on his shoulder. Evan stood nearby, his own injuries being tended by a younger man with the efficient movements of military training. You were supposed to drive north, Nico said the moment he saw Mara. His voice was rough with smoke and fury, and something that sounded like relief. I don't take orders well. You should know that by now. Stubborn woman. But the corner of his mouth lifted in something almost like a smile. The gray-haired woman, a doctor, Mara assumed, glanced up from her work. I need to stitch this. You want local anesthetic or whiskey? Both, Nico said. Smart man. She retrieved supplies from a medical cabinet while Mara moved closer, her eyes cataloging his injuries. The gash on his shoulder, bruising already blooming across his ribs, knuckles split and raw, blood on his collar that might or might not be his own. You look like hell, Mara said quietly. You should see the other guys. He caught her hand, his grip gentle despite the violence still humming through him. Are you hurt? The baby? We're fine, scared but fine. She pressed his palm to her belly, letting him feel the restless movements beneath. See? Still kicking. Something in Nico's expression cracked. He pulled Mara closer, pressing his forehead to her stomach, his breath warm through the fabric of her dress. I'm sorry. For all of this. For putting you in danger. Stop. Mara's fingers found his hair, dark and soot-streaked. We put each other in danger the moment we fell in love. That's not something to apologize for. The doctor cleared her throat meaningfully. As touching as this is, I need to close that wound before you bleed all over my clean floor. Nico straightened, allowing the woman to work while Mara settled into a chair beside him. Across the room, Evan was arguing in low tones with the medic about whether he needed stitches for the gash across his forearm. He did good tonight, Nico said, following Mara's gaze. Saved my life twice. Took out 3 of Father's men without hesitation. You sound surprised. I am. Evan's always been softer, more uncertain. I thought Father would break him eventually, turn him into another mindless soldier. Nico winced as the needle pierced his skin. But tonight, he made choices, real choices, the kind you can't take back. Like you did when you met me? Exactly like that. His eyes found hers, intense despite the pain. We're all choosing sides now, family over empire, love over power. And Father's going to make us pay for those choices. The doctor finished her work, taping gauze over the stitches with brisk efficiency. You'll need antibiotics and rest at least 48 hours before you do anything stupid like starting another war. I'll rest when this is over. Men. The doctor packed up her supplies with the air of someone who'd had this conversation many times before. I'll be upstairs if anyone else decides to bleed on my furniture. She left, taking the younger medic with her, leaving just Nico, Mara, Evan, Victor, and Marco in the basement. The silence stretched taut as Victor pulled up a map on his laptop, spreading it across a table. All right, Victor said. Let's talk strategy. We have approximately 12 hours before the meeting at the Rourke estate. That gives us a very narrow window to plan an approach that doesn't get us all killed. The estate is a fortress, Evan said, moving to study the map. Private security, cameras, motion sensors. Father's probably tripled the guard after tonight's attack. Walking in through the front door is suicide. Then we don't use the front door. Nico joined them at the table, moving stiffly. What about the service entrance? The old estate used to have tunnels for deliveries. Still there, but they're monitored now. Cameras, weight sensors in the floor. Evan traced a finger along the property line. Your best bet is the cliffside. The estate backs up to the sound, and there's a maintenance ladder that runs from the boat dock to the gardens. It's technically patrolled, but the guards get lazy around midnight when the main event starts. How do you know their timing? Marco asked. Because I've been to a dozen of these signing ceremonies. They always follow the same pattern. Cocktails at 11, formal signing at midnight, celebration until dawn. Evan's expression was grim. Father's creatures of habit. He thinks ritual equals power. Then we use that against him. Nico straightened, his tactical mind clearly working through scenarios. Victor, you and Marco handle logistics. I need weapons, communication equipment, and a boat that can make it across the sound without lights. Evan, you're our inside man. You attend the ceremony as planned, act like nothing's wrong. When I give the signal, you create a distraction. What kind of distraction? The kind that makes everyone in that room question Father's authority. Can you do that? Evan nodded slowly. I have some ideas. Good. Mara, Nico turned to her, his expression softening. You stay here, with the doctor, where it's safe. Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not. Mara stood, moving to face him directly. I'm not sitting in a basement while you walk into a death trap. If you're going to confront your father, I'm going with you. That's insane. You're 7 months pregnant, which is exactly why I need to be there. Because your father's whole justification for threatening me was that I was a liability. Proof that you'd gone soft, that love made you weak. She pressed a hand to her belly. So let's show him the opposite. Let's show him that this baby, our baby, is the thing that makes you stronger, not weaker. Nico stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to stand beside you. There's a difference. She's right, Evan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Father's whole power structure is built on the idea that family is weakness, that attachment is vulnerability. But if you walk in there with Mara, alive, pregnant, defiant, it breaks his narrative, shows everyone that you're not some lovesick fool he can control. You're a man willing to fight for what matters. It's still dangerous, Victor pointed out. Everything's dangerous now. Mara kept her eyes locked on Nico's. At least this way we face it together. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation and fear, and something that might have been hope. Nico's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he turned to Victor. Extra body armor. The kind that'll fit over her belly, and she stays with me the entire time. The second things go wrong, Marco gets her out. Non-negotiable. Agreed, Mara said before he could change his mind. They spent the next 6 hours planning, refining, arguing over details. Victor procured weapons from contacts Mara didn't want to know about. Marco mapped out 3 escape routes from the estate. Evan wrote and rewrote his planned speech, the one he'd deliver when Nico gave the signal. Through it all, Mara felt the weight of what they were attempting settle over her like a shroud. They were about to walk into the heart of enemy territory and challenge a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness and control. The odds of survival were slim. The odds of success even slimmer. But doing nothing meant living in fear forever. Meant raising their daughter in a world where Nico's father could reach out at any moment and destroy everything they'd built. At least this way, they fought back. The sun was setting when they assembled in the garage. Victor had procured dark tactical gear for everyone, along with the promised body armor for Mara, a lightweight vest designed to protect both her and the baby. Nico helped her into it with gentle hands, his expression unreadable. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. Not a chance. Then stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, I'll consider it. She caught his hand, squeezing tight. We're going to survive this, Nico, all of us, including your father. I'm not planning to kill him, just dethrone him. Good. Because our daughter deserves to know her grandfather, even if he is a manipulative bastard. Despite everything, Nico laughed. You're terrifying, you know that? I learned from the best. They loaded into 2 vehicles, Victor and Marco in the lead SUV, Nico, Mara, and Evan following in a second. The drive to the Hamptons took 90 minutes through evening traffic, each mile bringing them closer to confrontation. Evan spent the trip coaching Nico on what to expect. The Castellanos will be there, Giuseppe and his daughter Maria. They're the real power players. Father needs their shipping routes and political connections. If we can turn them, the whole alliance collapses. How do I turn them? By offering them what Father can't. Legitimacy, a way out of the shadows and into real business. Giuseppe's been trying to go legitimate for years, but Father keeps pulling him back into the dirt. Evan's expression was thoughtful. Offer him a path forward that doesn't involve blood and bribes, and he might just take it. And if he doesn't, then we improvise. They arrived at the Sound's edge as full dark settled over the water. Victor had secured a small speedboat, painted matte black and equipped with a near-silent electric motor. They transferred weapons and equipment aboard while Marco stayed with the vehicles, ready to create an extraction point if things went wrong. The crossing was tense and cold, spray from the dark water soaking them all. Mara huddled against Nico's side, his arm wrapped around her, both of them watching the Rourke estate grow larger as they approached. It was obscene in its wealth. A sprawling mansion perched on manicured cliffs, every window blazing with light, luxury cars lining the circular drive. Through the tall windows, Mara could see figures moving, the kind of beautiful people who thought themselves untouchable. They were about to learn differently. Victor cut the motor 50 yards from shore, letting the boat drift silently toward the dock Evan had indicated. The maintenance ladder was exactly where he'd promised, rusted metal rungs climbing the cliff face, barely visible in the darkness. "I'll go first," Victor said. "Nico second with Mara. Evan, you enter through the front like planned. We'll meet you inside." "Be careful," Evan said. "Father's paranoid on good days. Tonight he'll be watching everything." Then we give him something to watch. The climb was a nightmare. The ladder was slick with sea spray, the rungs spaced too far apart for Mara's pregnant body. Nico stayed directly behind her, his hand steadying her when she faltered, his voice a constant stream of encouragement. "That's it. One more. You're doing great. Just a few more feet." They reached the top gasping, Mara's arms trembling with exertion. The garden spread before them, geometric precision in the darkness, pathways lit by subtle ground lighting. Beyond, the mansion rose like something from a movie, all glass and stone and old money. Victor led them through the shadows, avoiding the lit paths, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this kind of infiltration before. They reached a service door that Evan had promised would be unlocked. It was. Inside, the mansion was a maze of marble and wealth. They could hear music and laughter from the main ballroom, the party already in full swing. Victor checked his watch. 11:30. We have 30 minutes before the signing. Let's find a position where we can observe without being seen. They made their way through servant corridors and utility spaces, finally finding a gallery overlooking the ballroom. From this vantage point, they could see everything, the guests in their designer clothes and million-dollar jewelry, the security positioned at every exit, the raised dais where a signing table had been set with elaborate ceremony. And there, holding court at the center of it all, was Alexander Moreau. Nico's father looked exactly as Mara remembered from photographs, tall and distinguished, his gray hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from ice. He wore authority like other men wore cologne, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. Beside him, the Rourke patriarch laughed at some shared joke. And next to them, an older man Mara assumed was Giuseppe Castellano, flanked by a striking woman in a red dress who must be his daughter, Maria. "There's Evan," Nico murmured, gesturing to where his brother had just entered the ballroom. Evan moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting champagne and congratulations, playing his role perfectly. Victor's radio crackled softly. Marco's voice came through, barely audible. "Teams are in position. On your signal." "Copy." Victor turned to Nico. "Ready?" Nico's hand found Mara's, squeezing once. "Let's end this." They descended from the gallery, Victor leading them to a side entrance that would put them directly in the ballroom. As they walked, Mara felt her heart hammering against her ribs, felt the baby's restless movements, felt the weight of what they were about to do settle over her like armor. At the door, Nico paused. "Once we step through, there's no going back. Father will see us, and everything accelerates." You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Then let's show them what real power looks like. Nico pushed open the door and they walked into the ballroom like they owned it. The effect was instantaneous. Conversation died. Heads turned. Someone gasped. The music stumbled to a halt. Alexander Moreau's face went white, then red, then absolutely rigid with fury. "Hello, Father," Nico said into the ringing silence. His voice carried across the ballroom with perfect clarity. "I hope we're not interrupting anything important." For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Alexander's security started forward, hands reaching for weapons. "Stop!" Alexander's command froze them mid-motion. His eyes never left Nico's face. "I thought you were dead." "You thought a lot of things. Most of them wrong." Nico guided Mara forward, his hand protective on her back. "You remember Mara, don't you? The woman you tried to erase, the mother of your grandchild." Alexander's gaze dropped to Mara's belly, his expression twisting with something ugly. "You brought her here, to my business, like some kind of trophy." "Not a trophy, a partner, my partner." Nico's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. "And before you try anything stupid, you should know. Every major news outlet in the city has been sent a package. Evidence of your manipulations. Recordings of your threats. Proof of the money you stole from Mara's account. The staged accident. All of it. You're bluffing. Try me. Make one move against her, and everything goes public. Your reputation, your empire, your carefully constructed legitimacy, all destroyed. Is that really worth holding on to power?" The silence was absolute. Every eye in the ballroom was locked on the confrontation, watching empire crack. Giuseppe Castellano spoke first, his voice thoughtful. "I wondered why you called this meeting with such urgency, Alexander. Why you needed our alliance formalized so quickly. Now I understand. You've been losing control, and desperate men make terrible partners." "I am not desperate. You threatened a pregnant woman, your own grandchild." Giuseppe's disgust was palpable. "I came here tonight thinking we were building something. Instead, I find chaos and cruelty. This is not business. This is madness. Giuseppe, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Which is why I'm walking away from this alliance before it destroys us all." Giuseppe turned to his daughter. "Maria, we're leaving." "Wait." Alexander's voice was sharp with panic. "You can't just—" "I can, and I am." Giuseppe paused at the ballroom entrance. "For what it's worth, Nico, you have your grandfather's eyes. He would be proud of the man you've become. Not the empire you inherited, but the character you've chosen. Remember that." Then the Castellanos were gone, taking with them any hope Alexander had of salvaging the alliance. The ballroom erupted in chaos, people shouting, security converging, the Rourkes demanding explanations. Through it all, Alexander stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. That's when Celeste made her move. She'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, her beautiful face twisted with fury. Now she stepped forward, something metallic glinting in her hand. A gun. "This is your fault," she screamed at Mara. "All of this. You ruined everything." The weapon came up, aimed directly at Mara's belly. Time became syrup. Nico was moving, shoving Mara behind him. Victor's weapon was clearing its holster. Evan was shouting something, lunging forward, but it was Alexander who moved fastest. Nico's father crossed the distance in 3 strides and stepped directly into Celeste's line of fire. The gunshot was deafening in the marble ballroom. Alexander staggered backward, blood blooming across his white shirt, his expression one of profound surprise. He collapsed into Nico's arms, his weight dragging them both to the floor. "Father," Nico's voice cracked. "I'm sorry," Alexander whispered, blood on his lips. I thought Empire was everything. Thought love made you weak. But watching you tonight," his hand found Nico's face. "You were stronger than I ever was. Braver. Better. Don't talk. The medics are coming. Too late. Been dying for years. Just took a bullet to notice." Alexander's eyes found Mara standing frozen with Nico's jacket wrapped around her, Victor's weapon finally trained on Celeste. "Protect them. Both of them. Be the man I couldn't be." "I will. I swear it." Good boy. Alexander's breathing became labored. Tell Evan. Tell him I'm proud. Of both of you. Finally proud. Then his eyes closed, and the man who'd built an empire on fear and control breathed his last in his son's arms. The chaos that followed was inevitable. Police, ambulances, questions that no one wanted to answer. Victor and Marco handled the authorities with the efficiency of men who'd done this before, while Evan confirmed the story. A tragic accident, a mentally unstable fiancé, a father who died protecting his family. By the time dawn broke over the Hamptons, the Rourke estate was swarming with investigators. Celeste had been taken into custody, still screaming about betrayal and ruined plans. The guests had scattered like roaches when the lights came on. And Nico sat on the mansion's front steps, his shirt still stained with his father's blood, his eyes distant and hollow. Mara settled beside him, her hand finding his. He saved me, Nico said quietly. After everything he did, all the manipulation and cruelty and threats, he still saved you, saved our baby. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not erasing the past, but choosing differently in the moment that matters most. I wanted to hate him. Spent 8 months hating him. And now, Nico's voice broke. Now I'll never get to tell him he was wrong. That love didn't make me weak, that you and the baby are the strongest things I've ever fought for. He knew. At the end, he knew. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the sound in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere inside, Evan was managing the aftermath, handling the empire that had just fallen into his and Nico's hands. Outside, the world kept spinning, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded. But on those steps, two people held each other against the chaos, choosing love over power, family over empire, hope over fear. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, against Mara's ribs. She's going to be fierce, Mara said softly. Like her mother. Nico pressed a kiss to Mara's temple. What happens now? Now we figure out how to live. Really live. Not just survive. I'd like that. Nico's hand found her belly, spreading wide over the life they'd created. I'd like that very much. Faction scrambling to claim their piece of the Empire faction, scrambling to claim their piece of the kingdom. Nico and Evan spent 18-hour days in conference rooms and private meetings, negotiating treaties and settlements with the precision of battlefield surgeons. But Mara watched it all from a distance, installed in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park that Nico had insisted was temporary until they figured out something permanent. The space was beautiful and sterile, decorated by someone who'd never actually lived there. She spent her days resting as the doctor ordered, watching the city sprawl below her like a circuit board, feeling the baby grow stronger with each passing day. It was Victor who brought the news 3 weeks after the confrontation at the Rourke estate. He arrived at the penthouse with his usual efficiency, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that might have been satisfaction on a less stoic man. Celeste Rourke accepted a plea deal, he told Mara, settling into one of the designer chairs that cost more than her old apartment's yearly rent. 20 years, eligible for parole in 12. Her father disowned her publicly and dissolved the engagement contract. The Rourke family wants nothing to do with this mess. And the evidence against Alexander? Mara asked. The recordings, the threats? Sealed by the court. Nico convinced the prosecutors that making it public would destabilize half the city's infrastructure. The official story is a family tragedy, a father who died protecting his son's pregnant girlfriend from a mentally unstable woman. Clean, simple, mostly true. Is anything about this situation simple? Victor's smile was brief. No, but Nico's good at making complicated things look easy. It's one of his more valuable skills. Mara pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby's familiar movements. 8 months now, and every kick reminded her of how close they'd come to losing everything. How is he? Really? Grieving, working too hard, refusing to talk about his feelings like a good morose son. Victor's expression softened slightly. But he asks about you constantly, makes me report on your health 3 times a day, threatened to fire the cook when she made you something you didn't like for dinner. Despite everything, Mara smiled. That sounds like him? He's planning something, won't tell me what. But he's been meeting with architects and contractors, pulling permits for some property renovation. Victor stood, moving toward the door. My advice? Be patient with him. He's trying to build you the life he promised 8 months ago, just taking the long route. After Victor left, Mara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city transform as afternoon became evening. Somewhere out there, Nico was reshaping an empire, making choices about territory and power and the future of his family's legacy. And she was here, waiting, growing heavier with each day, wondering if there was room in his new world for the quiet life they'd once imagined. The answer came 2 days later when Nico appeared at the penthouse door at 7 in the morning, wearing jeans and a smile that made her heart stutter. "Get dressed," he said. "Comfortable clothes. We're going somewhere." "Where?" "It's a surprise." "Trust me?" She did. Despite everything, the lies and fear and violence, she trusted him absolutely. They drove north in Nico's personal car, a sleek sedan that handled the highway with predatory grace. Marco followed at a discreet distance in the SUV because Nico still refused to go anywhere without security. But for the first time in weeks, Mara saw him relax, his hands easy on the wheel, his expression almost peaceful. "I've been thinking," Nico said as they crossed into Westchester, "about what kind of life I want our daughter to have, what kind of father I want to be. And I don't want her growing up in my father's shadow. Don't want her first memories to be of armed guards and business meetings. Don't want her thinking power and fear are the same thing." He glanced at Mara, his eyes vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I want her to have what I never did. Safety, peace, parents who choose her over empire." "That's a beautiful dream." "It's more than a dream." Nico turned off the highway onto a winding country road, trees closing in on both sides. "I've been working with Evan. We're restructuring everything, selling off the illegal operations, legitimizing the businesses that can be saved, establishing foundations to handle the rest. It's going to take years, but when we're done, the Moreau name won't be synonymous with crime. It'll mean something better." Mara's throat tightened. "Your father would hate that." "My father died saving you. Maybe that was his way of telling me it's okay to choose differently." Nico's voice was rough with emotion. "Maybe that bullet was his apology for all the years he chose wrong." They drove in silence for another 10 minutes before Nico pulled onto a gravel drive that wound through dense woods. And then the trees opened up and Mara's breath caught. The loft stood at the edge of a pristine lake, its brick facade restored to glory, new windows gleaming in the morning sun. The chain-link fence was gone, replaced by landscaped gardens. The demolition notices had been replaced by flowering vines climbing the walls. "You rebuilt it," Mara whispered. "I'm rebuilding it, still 3 months from finished." Nico parked and came around to help her from the car, his hand steady on her back. "But I wanted you to see it. Wanted you to know this is what I've been doing while you've been resting, making real what we dreamed about." He led her inside and the transformation was breathtaking. The rotted floors had been replaced with reclaimed wood. The water damage had been repaired, revealing the beautiful bones of the space, soaring ceilings, exposed brick, those massive windows overlooking the lake. It was still a construction site, but Mara could see the vision beneath the sawdust and scaffolding. 4 bedrooms upstairs, Nico said, guiding her through the space. "The master overlooks the water, 2 rooms for children. I thought maybe we'd want more than one eventually, and a guest suite for when Evan visits." He stopped in what would become the kitchen, his expression nervous. "What do you think?" "I think it's perfect." Mara turned in a slow circle, imagining the life they could build here. Morning light through those windows, the baby's laughter echoing off brick walls. A future that didn't involve running or hiding or fear. "But Nico, I can't afford." "It's not about affording, it's about deserving." He caught her hands, his grip warm and certain. "You deserve a home, Mara, a real home. Not a penthouse you're visiting or a safe house you're hiding in, somewhere that's yours. Ours." "What about the empire, your responsibilities in the city?" "Evan's taking over daily operations. I'll consult, handle the big decisions, but the day-to-day management is his now. He's better at it anyway, more patient, more diplomatic." Nico's smile was self-deprecating. "Turns out I'm much better at building things than running them. So I'm going to build this house, a life, a family." Mara's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "You're sure this is what you want?" "I've never been more sure of anything. Except maybe this." He dropped to one knee on the dusty floor, pulling a small box from his pocket. I know I asked you before, 8 months ago in a different life, and I know everything went wrong. But I'm asking again because I need you to know this isn't obligation or guilt or trying to fix the past. This is me choosing you, choosing us, choosing the future we're going to build together. He opened the box, revealing a ring that was nothing like the ostentatious diamond he'd offered before. This was simpler, more elegant. A single stone set in platinum, surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the light like water. Marry me, Mara, not because of the baby or the empire or anything except the fact that I love you more than I thought possible to love another person. Marry me, and let's build something beautiful out of all this wreckage. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Nico slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, his face buried in her hair. I love you, he whispered against her temple. I love you and our daughter and the life we're going to have. And I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret you. Never. They stood in the half-finished kitchen, holding each other as dust motes danced in the sunlight and the lake sparkled beyond the windows. Marco waited outside, giving them privacy. The contractors wouldn't arrive for another hour. For this moment, they had the whole world to themselves. Later, Nico showed her the rest of the property, the dock where they could keep a small boat, the clearing where he wanted to build a greenhouse, the garden plot already marked out for vegetables. He talked about his plans like a man describing a religion, each detail carefully considered, each choice made with their daughter in mind. I want her to know how things grow, he said, gesturing to the garden space. Want her to understand that beautiful things take time and care, that not everything valuable comes from power or money. You're going to be an amazing father. I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. He pulled her close, his hand finding the swell of her belly. But I have an excellent teacher. You've been fighting for her since before she existed, teaching me what real strength looks like. The baby kicked against his palm, and Nico's entire face transformed with wonder. She's getting strong. She takes after her father. Mara covered his hand with hers. Stubborn, fierce, unwilling to give up even when the odds are impossible. Let's hope she gets your compassion too, and your courage, and that thing you do where you make me believe in better futures. They spent the rest of the day at the loft, Nico showing her paint samples and tile options, asking her opinion on every detail. By the time they drove back to the city, Mara's mind was full of possibilities, the life they were going to build, the family they were going to become. The wedding happened 3 weeks later in the gardens of the nearly finished loft, with only 20 people in attendance. Evan served as Nico's best man, his face still carrying shadows from their father's death, but his smile genuine. Victor and Marco stood guard, though their presence felt more ceremonial than necessary. Giuseppe Castellano and his daughter Maria came, a gesture of alliance that meant more than any business contract. Mara wore a simple white dress that accommodated her 9 months pregnant belly, her feet in comfortable flats because heels were impossible now. She'd imagined her wedding day 1,000 times as a girl, always picturing something grand and elaborate. But this, standing in a garden beside a lake with the man she loved and their daughter moving beneath her heart, this was better than any childhood fantasy. The officiant was brief and efficient, understanding that Mara couldn't stand for long periods without her back screaming in protest. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about choosing each other daily, about building a life that honored love over power, about being the parents their daughter deserved. When Nico kissed her, sealing the promises they'd made, Mara felt something shift in her chest, like a door closing on the woman she'd been, the waitress who'd run in fear, the ghost who'd hidden in condemned buildings, and a new door opening on someone braver, someone who'd walked into a ballroom and challenged an empire, someone who'd chosen love even when it meant danger. The reception was casual and warm, nothing like the elaborate affairs Nico's father would have demanded. They ate food from the local caterer, drank champagne Mara couldn't have but toasted anyway with sparkling cider. Evan made a speech about new beginnings that made several people cry. Victor presented them with keys to the finished loft, explaining that he'd taken the liberty of accelerating the construction timeline. You're officially homeless, he told them with the ghost of a smile. The penthouse lease ends tomorrow, and this place is ready for occupancy. Consider it a wedding present. Mara and Nico moved into the loft that night, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because most of the furniture hadn't arrived yet. But wrapped in blankets with Nico's arms around her and the baby doing gymnastics against her ribs, Mara felt more at home than she had anywhere in years. Happy? Nico asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Deliriously. Good, because I have one more surprise. Nico, you've already given me everything. Not everything, not yet. He shifted, reaching for something on the floor. When he came back, he was holding a folder. I've been working with lawyers for weeks on this. It's done now, but I wanted to wait until we were married to give it to you. Mara opened the folder, squinting at the legal documents in the dim light. It took her several minutes to understand what she was reading. When she did, her breath caught. You're giving me half of everything. Technically, I'm ensuring that legally you already own half. The loft. The legitimate businesses Evan and I are building. The investments and properties. All of it. Split equally between us. Because you're not my dependent or my kept woman or some trophy I'm protecting. You're my partner, my equal, and this is me making sure the world knows it. Mara's hand shook as she set the folder aside. This is millions, tens of millions. It's yours. Was always yours from the moment I fell in love with you. I just needed the lawyers to make it official. Nico's hand found her belly, spreading wide. And when our daughter is born, she'll inherit from both of us equally. Not just the Moreau empire, but your empire too. Everything we build together. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me figure out what to do with it all. Say you'll be my partner in building something that matters. Say you'll wake up beside me for the next 60 years and help me be better than my father ever was. Yes, to all of it. Yes. They made love carefully that night, Nico's hands gentle on her transformed body, both of them acutely aware of the life between them. Afterward, Mara lay awake listening to the lake lap against the shore, feeling the baby's restless movements, thinking about the impossible journey that had brought them here. She'd run to protect her child, had staged her death and hidden in shadows, and worked herself sick trying to survive alone. And somehow, impossibly, that choice had led her here, to a man who'd learned to choose love over power, to a home beside still water, to a future that didn't require running. The baby came 2 weeks later, 3 days before her due date. Mara's water broke at 2 in the morning, and suddenly the carefully planned hospital trip became a panicked scramble. Nico drove like a man possessed while Marco followed in the security vehicle, both of them probably breaking a dozen traffic laws. The labor was long and brutal and transformative. 18 hours of pain that rewrote Mara's understanding of strength. Nico stayed with her the entire time, his hand crushed in hers, his voice a constant anchor through the waves of agony. You're amazing. You're doing so well. Just a little longer. I love you. I love you so much. When their daughter finally arrived at 8:47 p.m., screaming her fury at the world, Mara understood for the first time what people meant when they said love could break you open and remake you. The tiny, red-faced creature the nurse placed on her chest was the most terrifying and beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She's perfect, Nico breathed, his eyes wet. Look at her. She's absolutely perfect. They named her Elena, after Nico's grandmother who'd been the only soft place in his childhood. Elena Grace Moreau, 7 pounds and 3 ounces of infinite possibility. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Mara had read books and taken classes, but nothing prepared her for the reality of keeping another human alive. Elena had opinions about everything, how she liked to be held, when she wanted to eat, the exact temperature of her bathwater. She was demanding and exhausting, and Mara loved her with a ferocity that sometimes frightened her. Nico was a revelation as a father. He changed diapers with the same focused intensity he brought to business negotiations. He walked the floors at 3 a.m. singing off-key lullabies. He stared at Elena like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe in. His expression transformed into something soft and vulnerable. I didn't think I could do this, he confessed one night, holding Elena against his chest while she slept. Didn't think I had it in me to be gentle enough, patient enough. You're doing beautifully. I'm terrified I'll mess her up, turn her into something hard and damaged like my father tried to do to me. You won't, because you're choosing differently. Every day, with every decision, you're showing her that love is stronger than fear. Mara reached over to touch Elena's impossibly small hand. She's going to grow up knowing she's cherished. That's the greatest gift you could give her. Evan visited often, bringing gifts and stories from the city. The empire was transforming under his leadership, less focused on territory and control, more invested in legitimate business and community development. He'd established foundations in Alexander's name, funneling money into education and housing initiatives that actually helped people instead of exploiting them. Father would hate it, Evan said, holding Elena with surprising confidence for a man who'd never been around babies. But I think that's the point. We're building something better out of his wreckage, turning the Moreau name into something our children won't have to run from. Any prospects for children of your own? Mara asked. Evan's smile was mysterious. Maybe. There's someone, but I'm taking it slow, learning from my brother's mistakes. No secret engagements to ruthless socialites for me. They laughed, the sound easy and warm, and Mara marveled at how normal this felt. How they'd taken the broken pieces of a crime empire and somehow assembled them into something resembling family. The months passed in a rhythm of small moments and profound transformations. Elena's first smile at 6 weeks, her first laugh at 3 months, the way she tracked Nico with her eyes, already recognizing the man who sang to her and changed her and wore his heart on his sleeve every time he looked at her. Mara returned to writing, something she'd abandoned years ago when survival became her only priority. She started a blog about second chances and building lives from wreckage, keeping the details vague but the emotions honest. To her surprise, people read it. Hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of people who saw their own struggles reflected in her words. You're giving people hope, Nico said, reading over her shoulder one afternoon while Elena napped in her bassinet, showing them that broken things can be rebuilt into something beautiful. Is that what we are? Broken things rebuilt? I think we're something better. We're proof that choosing love over fear can actually work, that you can walk away from violence and power and still build something worth having. By Elena's first birthday, the loft had become a real home. The walls held photographs of their small family, Mara and Nico on their wedding day, Elena's newborn pictures, candid shots of lazy Sunday mornings. The greenhouse Nico had built was full of thriving plants. The garden produced more vegetables than they could eat. They threw a party for Elena's birthday, inviting the small circle of people who'd become their chosen family. Victor brought an elaborate dollhouse he'd built himself. Marco contributed a college fund that would ensure Elena never worried about money. Evan arrived with Maria Castellano on his arm, both of them glowing with the kind of happiness that suggested Evan's mysterious relationship had become something serious. Giuseppe Castellano pulled Nico aside during the party, his expression thoughtful. You've done well. Built something legitimate and good. Your father would be horrified, Nico finished. But that's okay. I'm not building this for him. I'm building it for her. He gestured to where Elena was attempting to eat birthday cake with her entire face. For the life I want her to have. Smart man. And lucky. That woman of yours, she's steel-wrapped in grace. Treasure her. Every day. That night, after the guests had gone and Elena was asleep in her crib, Mara and Nico stood on the dock watching moonlight paint silver across the lake. The air was warm with early summer, full of cricket song and the whisper of wind through trees. Do you ever miss it? Mara asked. The power, the empire, being the person everyone feared. Sometimes, Nico admitted, there was a simplicity to that life. Clear rules, obvious victories. But then I look at Elena, or I watch you in the garden, or I wake up beside you in our home, and I remember this is what power actually looks like. Building instead of destroying. Choosing love even when it's harder. Creating something that'll outlast us. We did good, didn't we? We did better than good. We survived. We transformed. We built a life worth living. He pulled her close, his arms warm around her. And we're just getting started. Mara leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid weight of him, the steady beat of his heart. Behind them, the loft glowed with warm light. Inside, their daughter slept safely, dreaming whatever babies dream. Around them, the night was full of possibility. She thought about the waitress she'd been, terrified and running, convinced that survival was the best she could hope for. That woman would never have believed this ending was possible. would never have imagined that the crime boss who'd walked into Lennar door could transform into a man who built greenhouses and changed diapers and chose peace over power. But then she'd never imagined she could transform either, could go from invisible to invaluable, could stand in a ballroom and challenge an empire, could become not just a survivor but someone who thrived. They'd both been broken things, and they'd rebuilt each other into something stronger than either had been alone. "I love you," Mara said into the warm darkness. "I love you too. Both of you, all of you." Nico's hand found her belly, where they'd recently discovered another life was beginning. "All three of you, actually," Mara laughed, the sound carrying across the still water. "We're going to need more bedrooms. Good thing I bought the property next door. I was thinking we could expand, build a proper family compound. Space for as many kids as we decide to have." "You've been planning." "I'm always planning. It's what I do best. Though lately I've been planning futures instead of wars, plotting gardens instead of territories, building families instead of empires." They stood on the dock until the moon climbed high, talking about the children they'd have, and the life they'd build, and the legacy they'd leave. Not a legacy of fear and control like Alexander had wanted, but something better. Something that proved love was stronger than power, that choosing each other was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. When they finally went inside, Mara checked on Elena one last time. Their daughter slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm, her face relaxed in absolute trust. She had no idea how hard her parents had fought to give her this safety, how many battles they'd won and lost and won again. Someday, when Elena was old enough, they'd tell her the story, how her mother had run to protect her before she was even born, how her father had chosen love over empire, how her grandfather had died saving them all, how a family had been broken and rebuilt into something better. But for now, Elena slept, and her parents stood watch, keeping the darkness at bay, building a future where their daughter would never have to choose between love and survival. Because in the end, that was what this had all been about. Not power or territory or empire, just two people choosing each other against impossible odds. Two people who'd been broken by violence and remade by love. Two people who'd proven that even in the darkest places, hope could take root and grow into something beautiful. Mara turned out the light and followed Nico to their bedroom. Through the window, the lake gleamed silver black beneath the moon. The world was vast and complicated and still full of danger. But here, in this home they'd built from wreckage and dreams, they were safe. They were home. They were family. And that was everything.